The England Gambit arises from white playing pawn to d4 and black responding with the similarly absurd-looking move pawn to e5. At first, it looks like black has given up. White could just capture this pawn and should do that, but black has something in mind. After knight to c6, attacking this pawn, white naturally defends it with knight to r3. Here, black continues with queen to e7, attacking this pawn for the second time. Therefore, the most natural reaction for white once again would be to defend the central pawn by playing bishop to f4. So far, it looks like white is completely dominating with an actual pawn. Black's position is awkward and life is good. But here comes black's counterattack, queen to b4. This is actually a triple attack on the king, as well as on the bishop at f4 and the pawn on b2. The way to handle that for white would be bringing the bishop down to d2. Covering the king. Now queen takes here on b2, also attacking white's rook on a1, and that is the moment of truth. Most players here playing white who are unfamiliar with this trap automatically play bishop to c3, which looks really cool, attacking the queen, defending the rook, and gaining a tempo. All seems good, but that falls right into black's trap. Here comes bishop to b4, pinning the bishop down to the queen. Therefore, it can't capture the queen anymore. Instead, white has to defend this bishop somehow. Now the rook on a1 is still hanging, and white is left with all these problems. If bishop takes b4, black simply recaptures. Now not only is the rook still hanging on a1, but black is also threatening knight takes c2, which is nearly a checkmate and will attack the king as well as the rook once again. White is overwhelmed and completely destroyed within just 7 moves, so that's what you definitely should stay away from. First things first, we know that in order to defend this rook, you should not do so with bishop to c3, as that error falls right into their trap after bishop to b4. Instead, you want to play knight to c3. This way, your queen starts defending the rook and, simultaneously, you bring one more piece into action, which is always nice. In this case, black has 2 major options to continue pressuring you. One being knight to b4, insisting on the knight takes c2 tactic, attacking the king as well as the rook. And the second being bishop to b4, putting pressure along this diagonal. We'll cover both, starting with the main line of black, which is bishop to b4. Now, the position still remains somewhat unpleasant for white. There's the threat of bishop takes c3, and the rook on a1 is slightly hanging. It's defended currently. But white's position seems shaky. So, you play rook to b1 to initiate a counterattack, and you no longer have to worry about the hanging rook. Now the queen has only one square to retreat, queen to a3. At this position, most players tend to just defend their knight and then develop, but I recommend that you counterattack instead. Black's unsound attack shouldn't be good, and it isn't. You can confirm this by going aggressively with knight to d5. This way, you not only defend your knight so it can't be captured, but you also counterattack the pawn on c7, threatening to fork black's king and rook. Additionally, the bishop on b4 is hanging as well. Therefore, bishop takes d2 is more or less forced. Queen recaptures here, and black may try one last trick with queen takes a2, counterattacking your rook for the last time. In this case, you simply bring it to the center of the board with rook to d1. And now black's attack is completely over. They still have to address the threat of knight takes c7, forking the king and rook. Now, perhaps your opponent, playing this risky opening, might try a bold move like king to d8. But that's not the end of the story. You won't let them slip away so easily. Here, you prepare yet another fork with knight to g5. This time threatening the pawn on f7, which will also fork the king and the rook. Now black is completely overwhelmed. Not only is the king exposed in the middle of the board, but you also have a lot of interesting threats, and the following moves are just a lot of fun. I hope you get a chance to play them sometime. Now, how does black defend this pawn on f7? One option would be to capture your pawn on e5, which simultaneously defends the f7 pawn. To this, you respond with queen to c3, creating multiple threats all over the board. You're threatening queen takes c7 check, and also attacking the knight on e5, which can't easily move away since it needs to defend this pawn. And secondly, your queen is also x-raying along this diagonal. You can see just how much pressure you're putting on black and how much you're making them suffer. One way for black to handle this is by playing pawn to f6, which both defends the knight and counterattacks yours. Here, there's an absolutely phenomenal finish. It's really not easy to find in a live game. The position remains a bit complicated, with pieces attacking each other and calculating variations not being simple. But if you know these tactics, you're going to crush it within just 3 moves. Basically, knight to e6 check is a common tactical theme. Since black's king is in the middle of the board, we want to open up this file, where we already have our rook. Now, after pawn takes, queen takes c7 check forces the king to move. We'd love to deliver rook to d8 checkmate, but our knight is in the way. So, we sacrifice with knight takes f6, and after black recaptures, rook to d8 is checkmate. This is a beautiful refutation of black's tricky opening. After white plays knight to g5, threatening knight takes f7, aside from knight takes e5, which we just covered, black has one more way to defend, by playing knight to h6, defending the pawn that way. Here, you still have a beautiful refutation. Similar to the previous variation, we still want to break open the d-file and reach black's king, which you accomplish by playing pawn to e6. Trying to eliminate this pawn. Black may capture it, but you don't hesitate to sacrifice your knight. After pawn recaptures, your goal is achieved, the d-file is open. Although you could attack black's king, it's even easier to drop the knight back. This creates a discovered attack on black's queen, as it's checked to the king. They're forced to move the king, allowing you to capture the queen and continue attacking. So once again, this is completely winning for white. We've just covered black's main line, bishop to b4, which tries to attack along this diagonal. Black's second attempt might be knight to b4, hoping you'll overlook the knight takes c2 fork on your king and rook. You need to defend this pawn, and the move to play is knight to d4, defending the pawn. But that's not the end, black continues with pawn to c5. Trying to remove your knight so they can still execute the main threat of knight takes c2. What do you do then? What's really helpful in this variation is the move rook to b1. It's very useful to play this in between move to kick the queen away, so you don't have to worry about defending your rook anymore. Rook to b1 counterattacks the queen, forcing it to retreat, and you can follow up with knight to b5. Not only do you eliminate black's attack, but you also counterattack the queen and threaten knight to c7. Forking the king and rook. By turning the tables, you're now the one threatening a fork. At this point, the queen has to retreat to a5. So that the queen is no longer a tactic powers the square on c7. Now you play pawn to a3, and at first, like you just keep attacking, things are going smoothly. It looks like you're nearly winning. Like most, the knight back, you win really easily, but there is one last trick that black can try. So, first off, they cannot really move the knight back because then you go knight to d5. Which opens up this discovered attack, and you then insist on playing knight to c7 on the next move because now you've got two knights supporting that square, so that's just easily winning. But here instead, because black is playing this tricky opening, you know, they're lovely strikes, they're gonna play pawn a6, and that creates a bit of a chaotic situation because, yeah. You can grab this knight on b4, they recapture, but now it's still not that clear for a while how to save your pieces because the black is attacking a lot of them. And that's why I said that, you know, computer will tell you that while it's like completely winning, I don't know what the evaluation is, but it's probably like +10, you know. But if you aren't aware of these variations, you can easily lose this game, which often happens to players just because the position remains to be very complicated. So that's why I wanted to really share it with you today. Now, what saves you here, once again, is that in between rook move, so it's a critical tactical pattern here by going rook to a1. You once again kick this queen away, and whilst now your rook is actually fairly active on the a-file, so if the queen goes back. What you may notice here is that actually black is no longer threatening to capture your knight because this pawn is pinned down to the rook. And that's another advantage if you bring your rook to a1. So this in between rook move is something worth noticing here.